The ground shook violently as the monstrosity burst through the crumbling storefront, its grotesque, mutated form towering over the terrified survivors. Twisted, elongated limbs lashed out, razor-sharp claws ripping through flesh with horrific ease. The creature's gaping maw unleashed an earth-shattering roar, saliva-dripping fangs bared in a feral display of savage hunger. Cowering behind an overturned car, Lena clutched her weapon, knuckles white with terror. Her heart pounded in her ears as she watched in mute horror, paralyzed by the sheer scale of the abomination before her. This was no ordinary zombie. It was something far worse, a nightmarish evolution beyond anything they had faced before. Just moments ago, the streets had been in chaos, a scrambling, panicked mob fleeing the relentless advance of the infected. But now, a deathly silence hung in the air, save for the creature's savage snarls and the anguished cries of those it had already claimed. Lena's gaze darted around frantically, searching for any sign of her companions. Where was Jared? And the others? Had they made it to safety? She cursed under her breath, knowing that in this hellish new world, no one was truly safe. Trust had become a luxury, and the only certainty was that the undead were adapting, growing stronger and hungrier with each passing day. A sudden movement caught her eye, and Lena held her breath as she spotted a figure crouched behind a pile of debris, cowering in the shadow of the monstrous zombie. It was Jared, his face pale with terror, his eyes pleading for her to do something, anything, to save them from this nightmare. Lena's finger tightened on the trigger, but she hesitated, torn between the need to protect her friend and the overwhelming fear that consumed her. What chance did they have against such a formidable foe? The zombie seemed impervious to their weapons, its thick, mutated hide shrugging off their desperate attempts to slow its advance. A deafening crash echoed through the streets as the creature smashed its way through a parked car, its single-minded focus on Jared's hiding place. Lena watched in helpless horror as the zombie drew closer, its gaze locked onto its prey. She knew she had to act, but the weight of her decision threatened to crush her resolve. Jared, run. She screamed, her voice drowned out by the creature's earth-shattering roar. She raised her weapon, her hands trembling, knowing full well that this could be the last moment of her life. But she had to try, for Jared, for the others, and for whatever slim chance of survival remained in this unforgiving new world. With a deep breath, Lena steadied her aim and opened fire, praying that her bullets would find their mark and give Jared the chance he needed to escape the zombie's deadly grasp. The air echoed with the deafening crack of gunfire as she unleashed a hail of lead, determined to stand her ground against the evolving horror that threatened to consume them all. The creature reeled back, roaring in pain as Lena's bullets pounded its mutated flesh. But its regenerative powers were astonishing, and within seconds, the wounds began to knit themselves closed, the creature's unholy resilience mocking her desperate attempts to stop it. Jared seized the moment, scrambling to his feet and sprinting down the debris-strewn street, his lungs burning with each desperate gasp for air. He risked a glance over his shoulder, his heart sinking as he saw the zombie turn its attention back to Lena, its hunger undiminished. Lena gritted her teeth, emptying her magazine into the creature's advancing form. But her shots seemed to have little effect, and she knew her ammunition would not last long against such a powerful foe. Cursing under her breath, she ducked behind the car, reloading with shaking hands as the zombie closed in, its gargantuan frame casting a looming shadow over her. Suddenly, a deafening explosion rocked the street, sending debris and shrapnel flying in all directions. Lena shielded her face as a fireball erupted from a nearby building, the blast wave slamming into the zombie and sending it reeling backward. Through the billowing smoke, she caught a glimpse of a familiar figure. Jared, wielding a makeshift Molotov cocktail, his face a mask of grim determination. Lena. Move! He shouted, tossing another flaming projectile at the stunned creature. Lena didn't hesitate, sprinting across the devastated landscape as the zombie thrashed and howled, its flesh sizzling under the flames. She reached Jared's position, and together they fled down the street, their footsteps echoing against the backdrop of the creature's agonized roars. As they ran, Lena couldn't help but feel a twinge of hope. Perhaps they had a chance to survive this nightmare after all. But the respite was short-lived, for as they rounded a corner, they were confronted by a sight that chilled their blood. A horde of the infected, their eyes glowing with unholy hunger, converging on their position. Jared's grip tightened on his remaining Molotov, his jaw set with grim determination. Lena steeled herself, her weapon at the ready, knowing that in this new world, the line between survival and oblivion had become perilously thin. They would have to fight tooth and nail for every moment of life, for the evolving horrors that threatened to consume them were relentless and unforgiving. As the horde closed in, Lena and Jared braced themselves for the coming onslaught, their only chance of escape becoming ever more uncertain with each passing second. The creature reeled back, roaring in pain as Lena's bullets pounded its mutated flesh. But its regenerative powers were astonishing, and within seconds the wounds began to knit themselves closed, the creature's unholy resilience mocking her desperate attempts to stop it. Jared seized the moment, scrambling to his feet and sprinting down the debris-strewn street, his lungs burning with each desperate gasp for air. He risked a glance over his shoulder, his heart sinking as he saw the zombie turn its attention back to Lena, its hunger undiminished. Lena gritted her teeth, emptying her magazine into the creature's advancing form. But her shots seemed to have little effect, and she knew her ammunition would not last long against such a powerful foe. Cursing under her breath, she ducked behind the car, reloading with shaking hands as the zombie closed in, its gargantuan frame casting a looming shadow over her. Suddenly, a deafening explosion rocked the street, sending debris and shrapnel flying in all directions. Lena shielded her face as a fireball erupted from a nearby building, the blast wave slamming into the zombie and sending it reeling backward. Through the billowing smoke, she caught a glimpse of a familiar figure. Jared, wielding a makeshift Molotov cocktail, his face a mask of grim determination. Asterisk Lena, move. Asterisk, he shouted, tossing another flaming projectile at the stunned creature. Lena didn't hesitate, sprinting across the devastated landscape as the zombie thrashed and howled, its flesh sizzling under the flames. She reached Jared's position, and together they fled down the street, their footsteps echoing against the backdrop of the creature's agonized roars. As they ran, Lena couldn't help but feel a twinge of hope. Perhaps they had a chance to survive this nightmare after all. But the respite was short-lived, for as they rounded a corner, they were confronted by a sight that chilled their blood. A horde of the infected, their eyes glowing with unholy hunger, converging on their position. Jared's grip tightened on his remaining Molotov, his jaw set with grim determination. Lena steeled herself, her weapon at the ready, knowing that in this new world, the line between survival and oblivion had become perilously thin. They would have to fight tooth and nail for every moment of life, for the evolving horrors that threatened to consume them were relentless and unforgiving. As the horde closed in, Lena and Jared braced themselves for the coming onslaught, their only chance of escape becoming ever more uncertain with each passing second. Lena's finger tightened on the trigger, her focus narrowing to the monstrous figure looming before them. She knew their chances of survival were slim, but she refused to go down without a fight. Jared stood beside her, his face a mask of grim determination, and together they opened fire, their weapons barking with desperate urgency. The creature recoiled as the bullets slammed into its mutated flesh, but it shrugged off the assault with unnerving ease. Its glowing red eyes fixed on the pair, and with a deafening roar, it charged forward, its massive, clawed limbs tearing through the debris with terrifying speed. Lena and Jared scattered, diving for cover as the creature's powerful blows shattered the ground where they had stood moments before. Rubble and shrapnel flew in all directions, forcing them to shield their faces as they scrambled to find a new position. Lena's heart pounded in her ears as she pressed herself against the crumbling wall of a nearby building, her ammunition dwindling with each desperate burst of gunfire. She risked a glance around the corner, her breath catching in her throat as she witnessed the true scale of the horror they were facing. The horde of infected had caught up to them, their twisted, decaying forms surging forward in a relentless tide. And behind them, the monstrous creature advanced, its movements fluid and precise, its malevolent intelligence a chilling contrast to the mindless savagery of the undead. Jared's voice cut through the chaos, hoarse with desperation. Lena, we have to get out of here. She knew he was right, but the weight of their situation threatened to crush her resolve. They were trapped, with the undead horde closing in from one side and the nightmarish creature blocking their path on the other. Their ammunition was running low, and the shelters they had relied upon were crumbling around them. As the infected drew closer, their guttural cries echoing through the devastated streets, Lena made a split-second decision. This way. She shouted, grabbing Jared's arm and dragging him towards a narrow alleyway that seemed to offer a glimmer of hope. They sprinted through the debris, their lungs burning, the thunderous footsteps of the creature, and the relentless pursuit of the horde spurring them onward. Lena's mind raced, searching for any path to salvation, but the harsh reality of their situation was inescapable. The zombies had evolved, and they were powerless to stop them. Lena and Jared's lungs burned as they raced through the narrow alleyway, their footsteps echoing against the crumbling walls. Behind them, the monstrous creature let out a bone-chilling roar, its massive frame crashing through the debris in pursuit. The horde of infected surged forward, their guttural cries urging them onward. Lena risked a glance over her shoulder, her heart sinking as she saw the relentless tide of undead closing in. They were running out of options, trapped in a labyrinth of decaying buildings and debris-strewn streets. As they rounded a corner, Lena caught sight of a glimmer of hope. A metal door, partially obscured by fallen masonry. There. She shouted, grabbing Jared's arm and pulling him towards the potential sanctuary. They threw their weight against the door, their fingers scrabbling for purchase as they fought to pry it open. The heavy metal groaned in protest, but finally it gave way, revealing a dimly lit stairwell beyond. Without hesitation, Lena and Jared plunged into the darkness, their footsteps echoing as they raced up the rickety stairs. Behind them, the sounds of the pursuing horde and the creature's thunderous footsteps grew ever closer, a constant reminder of the peril that nipped at their heels. As they climbed higher, Lena's lungs burned, her legs aching with each laborious step. But she refused to slow down, driven by the desperate need to escape the nightmare that had consumed their world. Jared kept pace beside her, his face a mask of grim determination. Finally, they reached the top of the stairs, bursting out onto a rooftop that offered a breathtaking, if ominous, view of the devastated city. But their respite was short-lived, for as they scanned the horizon, they spotted movement, a swarm of infected, converging on their position from all sides. Lena's heart sank, and she turned to Jared, her eyes filled with a mixture of fear and resignation. We're trapped. Jared's jaw tightened, and he raised his weapon, his finger tightening on the trigger. Then we'll make our stand here. Lena nodded, her own weapon at the ready, as the horde of undead closed in, their ceaseless cries echoing across the ruined cityscape. And somewhere in the distance, the monstrous creature's roar reverberated, a chilling reminder that the evolving horror they faced was relentless and unforgiving. They'd braced themselves for the final confrontation, knowing that their only hope was to sell their lives dearly, even if it meant facing an enemy they were powerless to stop. Lena and Jared stood back to back, their weapons raised as the horde of infected swarmed towards them. The rooftop offered little cover, and they knew their ammunition would not last long against the endless tide of undead. But they refused to go down without a fight. Lena's fingers tightened on the trigger, her shots ripping through the twisted, decaying forms of the approaching zombies. Jared moved in sync with her, his weapon barking with deadly precision, the two of them forming a desperate bulwark against the relentless onslaught. Yet for every zombie that fell, two more seemed to take its place. The horde pressed forward, their guttural cries echoing across the ruined cityscape. Lena's heart pounded in her ears, her mind racing as she searched for a way out of this hopeless situation. Suddenly, a deafening roar shattered the air, and Lena's blood ran cold as she caught sight of the monstrous creature emerging from the shadows. Its hulking form towered over the horde, its glowing red eyes fixed on the trapped survivors. Lena and Jared exchanged a desperate glance, their fingers tightening on their triggers as the creature advanced, its massive claws ripping through the infected with contemptuous ease. The zombies, in their mindless frenzy, were no match for the nightmarish abomination, and soon the rooftop was littered with their lifeless bodies. But the creature's focus remained fixed on Lena and Jared, its hunger undiminished. Lena knew they were outmatched, their weapons little more than an annoyance to the mutated monstrosity. Yet she refused to surrender, her determination fueled by the desperate need to survive. As the creature drew closer, Lena's mind raced, searching for any possible avenue of escape. And then, a glimmer of hope. A fire escape, partially obscured by debris, leading down to the streets below. Jared, this way. She shouted, grabbing his arm and pulling him towards the escape route. Jared hesitated for a moment, his gaze fixed on the advancing creature, but then he followed, his footsteps pounding the metal stairs as they descended into the chaos of the ruined city. The creature roared in frustration, its massive frame too large to descend the narrow stairwell. But Lena knew their respite would be fleeting. The evolving horror that threatened to consume them would not be so easily deterred. As they hit the ground, Lena and Jared pressed onward, their lungs burning, their legs aching, driven by the relentless need to survive. But the zombies were everywhere, their numbers seemingly endless, and the monstrous creature's pursuit was never far behind. The evolving nightmare had followed them, and Lena knew that they were running out of places to hide. Lena and Jared raced through the debris-strewn streets, their footsteps echoing against the crumbling walls. Behind them, the sounds of the pursuing horde and the monstrous creature's thunderous roars grew ever closer, a constant reminder of the peril that threatened to consume them. Lena's mind raced, desperately searching for a way to escape the nightmare that had engulfed their world. But the zombies were relentless, their ranks swelling with each passing moment, and the creature's unnatural resilience mocked their every attempt to slow its advance. As they rounded a corner, Lena caught sight of a glimmer of hope. A partially collapsed building, its shattered windows offering a potential avenue of escape. This way. She shouted, grabbing Jared's arm and pulling him towards the structure. They scrambled through the broken glass, their skin scratched and bloodied, but driven by the desperate need to find sanctuary. The interior of the building was dark and eerily silent, the air thick with the stench of decay. Lena and Jared pressed forward, their weapons at the ready, their senses heightened to the slightest sound or movement. They knew that the undead could be lurking in the shadows, waiting to strike, and the monstrous creature that pursued them would not be deterred so easily. Suddenly, a faint scuffling sound reached their ears, and Lena whirled, her finger tightening on the trigger. But instead of a zombie, a small group of survivors emerged from the gloom, their faces etched with a mixture of relief and fear. Thank God, one of them whispered, his voice trembling. We thought we were the only ones left. Lena's heart sank, her gaze sweeping over the haggard faces of the group. They were wounded, their supplies dwindling, and the haunted look in their eyes spoke of the horrors they had endured. We have to keep moving, Jared urged, his voice low and urgent. That thing is still out there, and it's not giving up. The survivors exchanged fearful glances, but they knew Jared was right. They had to find a way to escape the relentless pursuit of the evolving horror that threatened to consume them all. Steeling their resolve, the group pressed forward, their steps cautious and wary, their weapons at the ready. Lena's mind raced, searching for a path to salvation. But the harsh reality of their situation weighed heavily upon her. The zombies had evolved, and they were powerless to stop them. Lena and the group of ragtag survivors moved through the crumbling ruins of the building, their footsteps echoing in the oppressive silence. The air was thick with the stench of decay, a constant reminder of the horrors that had befallen their once thriving city. Jared led the way, his weapon at the ready, his eyes scanning the shadows for any sign of the undead. Lena brought up the rear, her grip tightening on her own gun, her senses on high alert. The monstrous creature that had pursued them was still out there, and they knew it was only a matter of time before it caught up to them. As they pushed deeper into the structure, they encountered more survivors, each one more haggard and weary than the last. The weight of their collective trauma was palpable, and Lena could see the glimmer of hope slowly fading from their eyes. Suddenly, a thunderous crash echoed through the building, followed by the unmistakable sound of the creature's earth-shattering roar. Lena's heart sank, and she knew their fragile sanctuary had been breached. Run. Jared shouted, his voice cutting through the chaos as the group surged forward, their footsteps pounding against the crumbling concrete. Lena and the others raced through the winding corridors, dodging debris and the grasping hands of the infected that lurched out from the shadows. The creature's roars grew ever closer, and Lena knew they were running out of time. As they emerged into a large open area, Lena's breath caught in her throat. The creature stood before them, its towering form blocking their path to freedom, its glowing red eyes fixed on the terrified survivors. Jared raised his weapon, his finger tightening on the trigger, but Lena knew it was a futile gesture. Their ammunition was nearly depleted, and the creature's regenerative powers were beyond their ability to overcome. The survivors huddled together, their faces etched with terror, their eyes pleading for a miracle that seemed increasingly out of reach. Lena felt a surge of despair, the weight of their hopeless situation crushing her resolve. And then, in the distance, a sound that sparked a glimmer of hope. The distant roar of an engine, growing steadily louder. Lena's head snapped towards the sound, and she saw a battered, armored vehicle careening towards them, its headlights cutting through the gloom. The creature turned, its attention momentarily diverted, and Lena seized the opportunity. Everyone, get down. She shouted, pulling the survivors to the ground as the vehicle bore down on the monstrous abomination. The creature roared in defiance, but the vehicle slammed into it with bone-crushing force, the impact sending the creature reeling. Lena and the others scrambled to their feet, a renewed sense of urgency driving them forward. As they piled into the vehicle, Lena caught a glimpse of the driver, a familiar face, battered but alive. Let's get the hell out of here, he shouted, his voice laced with grim determination. The engine roared to life, and the vehicle surged forward, leaving the crumbling ruins and the monstrous creature behind. Lena leaned back in her seat, her heart pounding, her mind reeling from the realization that they had somehow managed to escape the relentless horror that had consumed their world. But as the city faded into the distance, Lena knew that the battle was far from over. The zombies had evolved, and they were powerless to stop them. This was just the beginning of a fight for survival in a world that had been irrevocably changed.